All right, guys, so today in front of me from Stellum Spirits, we have their Hunter's Moon, which is part of their Black Label collection. Now, this is a blend of cask-strength bourbons distilled in Indiana, Tennessee, and Kentucky. This whiskey was actually made in preparation for winter with its nice warm aromas and flavors, and also inspired by the Hunter's Moon in October. This one comes in at 115.52 proof. Non-age stated, and there is no mash bill information at this time. I can tell you I was a big fan of their Lone Cypress. I thought that rye whiskey was absolutely fantastic. Tons of flavor on it. But let's see what this Hunter's Moon is all about, guys. So without further ado, let's go. All right, guys, so as I stated, this one comes in at 115.52 proof, non-age stated, and again, the mash bill is undisclosed. Let's go ahead and get in the nose. So the first two things that I get on the nose further into the glass, there's a lot of sweetness. It's a lot of vanilla sweetness, like a vanilla fudge or some butterscotch on the nose as well, almost along the borderlines of like a Werther's. This does smell like it is going to be dense, rich, creamy on the nose. So further away you pick up, I do pick up a little bit of some rye spice on there, but I also pick up some grape, which is fairly odd. But then there's also some lemon citrus, a little bit of grape, some rye spice further away. A lot of that sweetness starts to appear as you go further into the glass. A little bit of ethanol in there too. Again, it's at 115.52 proof, so not shy on the proof. Pretty interesting note though, getting that grape. It's not a dominant note. It was definitely a little present. Again, more further away from the glass than further into the glass. Yeah, it's grapey, butterscotch, nice kind of like a nice lemon citrus, and then that rye spice definitely kind of mingles in there in between some of those flavors. Really nice nose, guys. Let's get a palate. Cheers. So the initial burst of like rye spice, maybe mixed with some of that proof, definitely reminds me of that Lone Cypress on the first sip, where it just smacks you with like that spiciness, big, bold, spicy, little bit of proof. The front of the palate, it's definitely very different from the palate's very different from the nose. Again, nose is kind of very sweet, a little fruity there as well. So the first sip on here, I do get like, along with that proof bite, along with that spice bite, it's very baking spice forward from the front to mid palate. I do pick up a lot of cinnamon. I do pick up the rye spice itself, as well as a little bit of like nutmeg kind of going on there from the front to mid palate. As it goes into the back, you do get like this hint of like some white pepper. It starts to appear there towards the mid to back palate into the finish. It's a medium finish, I would say. Short to medium finish, but definitely along that medium side. My first sip all day. Pretty good. Let's get a second sip, guys. So that second sip definitely changed a little bit. Still a nice spice bite there on the front of the palate. Again, that cinnamon, that nutmeg, very present. Now, mid to back palate, really nice kind of sweet oak appears where that spiciness kind of left off. Nice sweet oak, again, appears there, mixing in with some of that white pepper that starts to kind of pull those flavors down as well. It's one of these whiskeys that kind of like slowly kind of pulls flavor down. But again, the finish is like a medium finish, but it kind of lingers on back there for a little bit, like the back of the throat. And then very, very slight kind of dark fruit note going on there too, into the finish with some of that white pepper, some of that sweet oak, maybe more along the lines of like a date somewhere, something like that. Not a ton of dark fruit that's present. It's definitely kind of an undertone as it hits that mid to back palate and into the finish. Like I said, with some of that white pepper and some of that sweet oak. Definitely very different. I know this one is a bourbon, the other one, the Lone Cypress is rye, but It's funny how these ones kind of how they kind of play around with the palate and where some of these flavors start to appear. Um, this one wasn't as crazy on the palate as the Lone Cypress was. I really like the Lone Cypress. I mean, that was a fantastic rye. I'll be looking forward to buying one of those here soon. But this one kind of plays around with the palate a little bit. Flavors start to appear, so it's definitely a pretty evolving whiskey on the palate. Nice flavors to it, though. Let's get a last sip, guys. Cheers. So now, even that sip changed a little bit, but like that initial burst of like spice and proof just kind of all came back. First sip was the same way. Second sip, it like died down completely, brought forth more of that like sweet oak kind of flavor on the mid to back palate. And then all of a sudden, like that spiciness kind of came back. It still didn't take away like the baking spices on the front of the palate, that cinnamon, kind of nutmeg kind of mixture right there, which is really nice. That starts to blend into, again, that rye spice and kind of sweet oak. Starts to bring forth some of those darker style flavors. But then, on that second sip, I started to get a little bit of some darker fruit, and on that last sip, more dark fruit started to appear. It's definitely along the lines of a date, or maybe maybe a plum, a little bit of a plum there, with some of that white pepper that finishes off. Finishes off through the finish. Medium, again, a medium finish. It's a short to medium finish, but I think it falls along that kind of like that medium category. I do, however, like the fact that it slowly kind of goes down into the palate and into the finish. Definitely a lot of evolving flavors on this one. I think with these whiskeys here, this and the Lone Cypress, I think it takes a little bit of airtime to maybe get adjusted after it's opened. But I tell you, both of these whiskeys evolve very well on the palate. I think they're very, I would say, almost exotic, if you will, in the sense that a lot of these flavors are very different. They come off very different. They play with the palate. They appear, they disappear. But I like that about a whiskey, because it's almost kind of like keeps you guessing, like what's going to happen on this sip, what's going to happen on the next sip. I do like that. And again, it's just it consistently just kind of changes. I've never, with that and the Lone Cypress, I never had a sip where it was like the same thing. It just, this one just completely changes where it hits. Like now that after everything's gone, I get this burnt citrus note that sits there on like the mid to like back of the sides of the palate there, which is, again, it's interesting. It's a very interesting note. Like typically with some of that stuff you would get a citrus note, but it's more along the lines of like a burnt orange or a burnt lemon. Still get that white pepper though. Like that white pepper is still sitting there. Again, now with that kind of like burnt, like orange, burnt lemon kind of mixture going on there. Either way, really, really nice blend here by Stellum Spirits. I want to thank you guys for tuning into this episode of Dusty Dan's Whiskey Reviews. I want to send a big shout out to the team over at Stellum Spirits for supplying me with the sample here to review on the channel. So again, just like its sister bottle, the Lone Cypress, which was the rye version of this under their black label, very evolving, very exotic kind of thing that they're doing here with these. I'm actually a big fan of their black label releases. I think with some of those older whiskeys that are in there, I think it brings forth more character to the whiskey, as well as a lot of like rich, dense, kind of more flavorful like palate, to me than some of their standard releases. Not that their standard releases are bad by any means. But I think the black label versions, again, where they incorporate more of that older whiskey into the blends, I think you definitely get a different mouthfeel. You definitely get a different experience with those older whiskeys that they're using in these blends. And again, those exotic flavors and stuff like that, you can tell just by the density, again, the richness of what's going on in the palate. But hell of a blend here, guys, by Stellum Spirits. So if you guys are looking for more reviews like this, make sure you hit the subscribe button, bell notification to be alerted of any upcoming reviews or live streams. You also find me on Instagram at Dusty Dan's Whiskey Reviews. And until next time, guys, stay dusty.